September 1992. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a sharp chill through Chicago's South Side, cutting through the thin jacket of Sonia Davis as she walked to Englewood High School. At 28, Sonia was in her third year as a history teacher, her classroom a sanctuary for students who faced the world's harshness beyond the school's graffiti-covered walls. Englewood was a neighborhood battered by poverty and violence, where Black and Latino families struggled against a city that seemed to have forgotten them. Sonia, born and raised just a few blocks away, knew their reality intimately. She'd clawed her way through college on scholarships and sheer will, determined to give back to the community that shaped her. Sonia's classroom on the second floor of Englewood High was a patchwork of hope. Posters of Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and Nelson Mandela hung alongside student projects, their bright colors a defiance against the peeling paint and flickering lights. Her students, mostly Black, some Latino, were a mix of dreamers and skeptics, their eyes carrying stories of loss and resilience. Sonia saw herself in them, especially in 16-year-old Jamal Brooks, a quiet boy with a talent for writing but a temper that flared when pushed. On September 14, 1992, trouble found Sonia's classroom. It started with a new student, Ethan Caldwell, a white 17-year-old whose family had recently moved to a nearby gentrifying pocket of Englewood. Ethan's arrival was a rarity. The school was nearly 95% Black and Latino, and his presence drew whispers. He carried himself with a swagger that bordered on arrogance, his comments in class laced with a subtle disdain Sonia couldn't ignore. That morning, during a lesson on the civil rights movement, Ethan interrupted Sonia's discussion of the Montgomery bus boycott. "Why we always gotta talk about this stuff?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "Slavery's over. Can't you people move on?" The room went silent. Sonia felt the weight of every student's gaze. Jamal's fists clenched on his desk. She took a breath, her voice steady but firm. "Ethan, history isn't just the past. It's why things are the way they are today. And you people includes everyone in this room, including you." Ethan smirked, muttering something under his breath. Sonia let it go, but the tension lingered. After class, Jamal approached her. "Miss Davis, you shouldn't let him talk like that," he said, his voice low. "He's trouble." Sonia nodded but urged Jamal to stay calm. "We handle this with words, not fists," she said. She believed it, but she also knew words weren't always enough. The incident with Ethan was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Sonia noticed a pattern. Ethan's comments grew bolder, targeting Black students with slurs disguised as jokes. He'd accidentally bump into Jamal in the hallway, whispering taunts. Other students reported similar encounters, but when Sonia brought it to the principal, Dr. Margaret Heller, a white woman in her late 50s, she was met with dismissal. "Teenagers are teenagers, Sonia," Heller said, her tone patronizing. "Don't make a mountain out of a molehill." Sonia wasn't surprised. Heller had a reputation for avoiding conflict, especially when it involved the few white families in the district. Englewood High was underfunded, its test scores scrutinized by the city, and Heller's priority was keeping the peace, or at least the appearance of it. But Sonia couldn't stay silent. On October 3rd, she filed a formal complaint against Ethan, documenting his behavior and its impact on her students. She also began mentoring Jamal and others, encouraging them to channel their anger into essays and poetry for a school project on identity. The complaint backfired. Ethan's father, Ronald Caldwell, a real estate developer with ties to the city's elite, stormed into Heller's office. By the next day, Sonia was called in for a meeting. Heller's face was tight with irritation. "You've stirred up trouble, Sonia," she said. "Mr. Caldwell is threatening to pull his funding for the school's renovation if we discipline his son. You need to let this go." Sonia's jaw tightened. "And what about my students? They deserve to feel safe." Heller leaned forward. "You're a good teacher, but you're young. Learn to pick your battles." Sonia left the meeting shaken but resolute. She refused to back down, escalating her complaint to the school board. It was a bold move, one that made her a target. By mid-October, rumors spread that Sonia was causing trouble, painting her as an agitator. Some parents, mostly white but a few Black ones wary of rocking the boat, questioned her methods. Anonymous notes appeared in her mailbox. "Mind your place. You're making things worse." Jamal, meanwhile, was spiraling. On October 20th, Ethan cornered him in the locker room, calling him a slur and shoving him against a wall. Jamal snapped, punching Ethan in the face. The fight was broken up, but both boys were suspended. Sonia pleaded with Heller to investigate Ethan's provocation, but the principal refused. "You encourage this behavior," Heller said, her words cutting. "You've got to stop pushing." Sonia felt the walls closing in. Her mother, Lorraine Davis, a 52-year-old nurse who'd raised Sonia alone, saw the toll it was taking. "You can't save everyone, baby," Lorraine said one night over dinner. "You're burning yourself out." But Sonia couldn't stop. She saw the fire in her students, the same fire she'd once had, and she refused to let it be snuffed out. The breaking point came on November 2nd, 1992. Sonia was leaving school late, her arms full of graded papers, when she noticed her car in the parking lot. The tires were slashed, the windshield shattered, and a single word was spray-painted across the hood. An asterisk, 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 asterisk. The slur hit her like a physical blow, her breath catching in her throat. She stood frozen, the papers slipping from her hands, scattering across the asphalt. A janitor, Mr. Thompson, found her and called the police. 2 officers arrived, both white, their faces impassive. "Probably just kids," one said, barely glancing at the car. "You got enemies, Miss Davis?" The question felt like an accusation. Sonia's voice trembled as she described the threats, Ethan's behavior, the school's inaction. The officers took a cursory report and left, promising to look into it. When Sonia got home, Lorraine was waiting. She pulled her daughter into a hug, her own eyes wet with tears. "This city will break you if you let it," she whispered. Sonia didn't respond. She felt the weight of every choice she'd made, to teach, to fight, to speak out, and wondered if it was worth it. The vandalism wasn't random. Sonia learned from a student, Keisha, that Ethan had bragged about teaching her a lesson. Sonia reported it to the school board, but the response was lukewarm. Ethan was questioned, but his father's influence loomed large. He faced no consequences. Jamal, still suspended, called Sonia that night, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have been there, Miss Davis. I could have stopped it." "You didn't do this, Jamal," Sonia said. "This is bigger than you." But it wasn't bigger than the system. Chicago in 1992 was a city of stark divides. Wealth and power concentrated downtown, while neighborhoods like Englewood were left to crumble. Black teachers like Sonia were expected to maintain order, not challenge it. Her complaint to the school board drew attention, but not the kind she'd hoped for. By late November, she was labeled a troublemaker, her job hanging by a thread. Sonia's fight was just beginning. The vandalism was a warning, a sign of how far her enemies would go. But it also lit a fire in her students. Jamal returned to school, his essays sharper, his voice louder. Keisha organized a student walkout demanding accountability. Sonia watched them, torn between pride and fear. She knew the cost of standing up, but she also knew the cost of staying silent. For now, she kept going, her car still bearing the scars of that night. But the shadows of justice were long, and Sonia was about to learn just how deep they stretched. Chicago, Illinois, November 1992. The Chicago winter was settling in. The air sharp with frost as Sonia Davis navigated the cracked sidewalks of Englewood. The spray-painted slur on her car still lingered in her mind, a wound that refused to heal. She'd had the car repaired, but the cost, nearly $2,000, drained her savings. At 28, Sonia was used to scraping by, but the vandalism felt like more than a financial blow. It was a message. Stop talking. Englewood High School, once her refuge, now felt like a battleground. Since the incident on November 2nd, Sonia had become a pariah among some staff. Principal Margaret Heller avoided her emails unanswered, her requests for classroom supplies ignored. Other teachers, mostly white but some black, kept their distance, their whispers trailing Sonia in the hallways. "She's stirring up trouble," she overheard one say. "This school doesn't need more problems." Her students, though, were her anchor. Jamal Brooks, now back from his suspension, poured his anger into his writing, his essays raw with stories of growing up black in Chicago. Keisha Turner, a 17-year-old with a sharp mind and sharper tongue, organized a student group to address discrimination at school. Sonia guided them, but she worried. The fire she'd ignited in them was powerful, but it made them targets. On November 15, 1992, the threats escalated. Sonia found a note taped to her classroom door. "You're next." The handwriting was jagged, the paper stained with what looked like coffee. She reported it to Heller, who sighed heavily. "Sonia, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's probably a prank." But Sonia knew better. She recognized the timing. Her latest school board complaint about Ethan Caldwell had just been filed. Ethan, the 17-year-old whose slurs and provocations had sparked the conflict, was untouchable. His father, Ronald Caldwell, had donated heavily to the school district, and his influence cast a long shadow. Ethan's behavior hadn't changed. If anything, it had worsened. He'd taken to glaring at Sonia in class, his smirks laced with menace. Jamal told her he'd seen Ethan with older boys from outside the school, their leather jackets and heavy boots hinting at gang ties. Sonia's mother, Lorraine, urged her to quit. "You're playing with fire, Sonia," she said one evening, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "These people don't play fair." Lorraine had seen enough in her 52 years, police brutality, redlining, the slow grind of a city that chewed up black dreams, to know the stakes. But Sonia couldn't walk away. "If I quit, Ma, what does that tell my kids? That they should give up too?" The breaking point came in early December. On December 5th, Keisha led a student walkout with over 50 students marching in the school courtyard, holding signs that read, "Stop the Hate" and "Justice for Englewood." Sonia hadn't organized it, but she stood with them, her heart swelling with pride. The protest drew local news crews, their cameras capturing the students' chants. But it also drew Ronald Caldwell's wrath. That evening, Sonia received a call from an unknown number. A man's voice, low and deliberate, said, "You're ruining lives, Miss Davis. Keep it up, and you'll lose yours." She hung up, her hands shaking, but the words echoed. She didn't tell Lorraine or her students, but she started locking her classroom door during breaks and checking her car before driving home. The retaliation wasn't just threats. On December 10th, Jamal was jumped on his way home from school. 3 older boys, none students, cornered him in an alley off 63rd Street. They beat him mercilessly, leaving him with a broken nose and a fractured arm. Jamal's mother, Tanya, called Sonia that night, her voice thick with tears. "He said they told him to stay in line," Tanya said. "This is because of you, isn't it?" Sonia felt the guilt like a knife. She visited Jamal in the hospital the next day. His face was swollen, his arm in a cast, but his eyes burned with defiance. "I ain't scared, Miss Davis," he said. "They think they can shut us up, but they can't." Sonia forced a smile, but inside she was crumbling. "What have I done? The police investigation was a farce." The officers, both white, questioned Jamal as if he'd provoked the attack. "You sure you didn't start something?" one asked. No arrests were made, no suspects named. Sonia suspected Ethan's involvement. Keisha had overheard him boasting about taking care of troublemakers, but there was no proof. By January 1993, Sonia's world was unraveling. Heller called her into a disciplinary meeting, citing disruptive behavior and encouraging student unrest. The school board, under pressure from Ronald Caldwell, was considering her termination. Sonia hired a lawyer, a young black woman named Carla Evans, who warned her the fight would be uphill. "They've got money and power," Carla said. "We've got the truth, but that's not always enough." The threats didn't stop. On January 20th, Sonia's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her furniture was trashed, her lesson plans torn apart, and a knife was left stabbed into her kitchen table. The police called it a random burglary, but Sonia knew it was a message. She stayed with Lorraine for a week, sleeping on the couch, her dreams plagued by faceless figures and burning cars. Her students kept her going. Keisha's group grew. Their meetings, now held in a church basement after school, banned them. Jamal, still recovering, wrote a poem that went viral in the community. Its lines about resilience and rage passed around like a rallying cry. Sonia saw their strength and felt her own flicker back. On February 1st, she spoke at a community forum, naming Ethan's behavior, Heller's inaction, and the system that protected them. The room erupted in applause, but Sonia saw the faces in the back. White parents, school officials, their expressions cold. The tragedy struck on February 15, 1993. Keisha was attacked while walking home from a meeting. Two men dragged her into an alley, beating her and carving a racial slur into her arm with a knife. She survived, but the assault left her in the hospital, her spirit battered. The police called it a random act, but Sonia and the community knew better. Keisha's activism, her connection to Sonia, had made her a target. Sonia visited Keisha every day, her guilt now a crushing weight. Keisha, her arm bandaged, grabbed Sonia's hand. "Don't stop, Miss Davis," she whispered. "They want us to break." Sonia nodded, tears in her eyes, but she wasn't sure she could keep going. The community rallied. On February 20th, over 200 people marched to Englewood High, demanding justice for Keisha and accountability for the school. Sonia spoke, her voice raw but steady. "This isn't just about one student or one teacher," she said. "It's about a system that lets hate win." The march made headlines, but it also painted a bigger target on Sonia's back. On March 3, 1993, the final blow came. Sonia was leaving the church after a meeting when a car sped by, a gunshot ringing out. The bullet grazed her shoulder, a shallow wound but a clear message. She collapsed, blood soaking her coat, as onlookers screamed. The car vanished, and the police, arriving 30 minutes later, called it a drive-by, unrelated to her activism. Sonia knew the truth. Someone wanted her dead. As she recovered at home, Lorraine by her side, Sonia faced a choice. The school board had suspended her without pay, pending a hearing. The threats were relentless, her students in danger. But the community's support, the marches, the letters, the voices of Jamal and Keisha, reminded her why she'd started. The shadows of justice were dark, but Sonia wasn't ready to let them win. Chicago, Illinois, March 1993. The bullet graze on Sonia Davis's shoulder had healed, leaving a thin scar that itched under her sweater. But the wound inside, the fear, the rage, the guilt, was far from closed. The drive-by shooting on March 3, 1993, had shaken her to her core, a stark reminder that her fight against racism at Englewood High School was no longer just about words or principles. It was about survival. At 28, Sonia felt older than her years, her once steady hands trembling as she locked her apartment door each night. Her mother, Lorraine, had become her shadow, refusing to let Sonia out of her sight. "You're all I've got left," Lorraine said, her voice cracking. At 52, she carried the weight of a lifetime in Chicago's South Side, the riots of '68, the loss of her husband to a heart attack, the daily grind of nursing in an underfunded hospital. Sonia wanted to protect her, to promise it would be okay, but the truth was heavier. The system, the school, the police, the city was closing in, and Sonia was running out of room to fight. Englewood High had suspended her without pay, citing disruptive conduct after the student protests and her public criticisms. The school board hearing, scheduled for April, loomed like a guillotine. Sonia's lawyer, Carla Evans, was blunt. "They're building a case to fire you," she said. "Ronald Caldwell's got the board in his pocket. We need evidence, Sonia, or you're done." Evidence was hard to come by. Ethan Caldwell, the 17-year-old whose slurs and provocations had sparked the conflict, remained untouchable. His father's money shielded him, and the school's inaction emboldened him. Sonia knew Ethan was linked to the vandalism of her car, the attack on Jamal, and the brutal assault on Keisha, but proof was elusive. The police had dismissed every incident, the car, the break-in, the shooting, as unrelated, their reports filed away like forgotten paperwork. But Sonia wasn't alone. The community had rallied after Keisha's attack. The church basement meetings grew, drawing parents, activists, and even a few sympathetic teachers. Jamal, now 16, and Keisha, 17, emerged as leaders despite their scars. Keisha's arm, marked by the slur carved into her skin, was bandaged but visible, a badge of her defiance. Jamal's poetry readings at community events drew crowds, his words a call to action. Sonia watched them, torn between pride and terror. She'd inspired them, but at what cost? On March 20th, 1993, Sonia made a decision. She couldn't wait for the school board to destroy her. With Carla's help, she filed a federal lawsuit against Englewood High, naming Principal Margaret Heller, the school board, and Ronald Caldwell for enabling a hostile environment and retaliating against her. The lawsuit was a long shot, but it sent a message. Sonia wasn't backing down. The response was swift. On March 25th, a brick crashed through Lorraine's living room window, a note tied to it. "Drop the suit or else." Sonia's heart sank as she read it, Lorraine's hands shaking beside her. She called the police, but the officer, a familiar face from past reports, shrugged. "Could be anyone," he said. "You're making a lot of enemies, Miss Davis." The threats didn't stop. Anonymous calls came at all hours, their messages chilling. "You're dead. Your kids won't save you." Sonia stopped sleeping, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. Lorraine begged her to drop the lawsuit, but Sonia refused. "If I stop now, Ma, they win. They'll keep hurting people like Keisha, like Jamal." The tragedy came on April 10th, 1993. Jamal was shot outside a community center after a poetry reading. A single bullet to the chest, fired from a passing car, ended his life before he hit the ground. He was 16. The police called it gang-related, but the community knew better. Jamal's activism, his connection to Sonia, had made him a target. His mother, Tanya, collapsed at the hospital, her screams echoing in Sonia's ears. "You did this," Tanya sobbed, her words cutting deeper than any bullet. Sonia attended Jamal's funeral on April 15th, her body numb. The church was packed, mourners spilling onto the street. Keisha spoke, her voice breaking as she read one of Jamal's poems. Sonia wanted to speak to honor him, but guilt silenced her. "I should have protected him." The weight of his death, of Keisha's scars, of every threat threatened to crush her. The school board hearing on April 20th was a formality. Heller presented a dossier of complaints against Sonia: insubordination, encouraging protests, disrupting the school's harmony. Ronald Caldwell sat in the audience, his presence a silent threat. Sonia's testimony, backed by Carla's arguments, was passionate but futile. The board voted 5-2 to terminate her. As she left the building, Ethan stood outside, his smirk a knife in her heart. Sonia's lawsuit became her last stand. Carla uncovered evidence, emails between Heller and Caldwell, witness statements from students, even a police report buried by the department, linking Ethan to the vandalism and suggesting his involvement in the attacks. On May 5th, the lawsuit gained traction when a local journalist, Maria Lopez, published an expose in the Chicago Defender. The article detailed Sonia's fight, Jamal's death, and the school's complicity, sparking outrage. The community's response was electric. On May 15th, over 500 people marched to City Hall, chanting Jamal's name and demanding accountability. Keisha, now stronger, led the crowd, her bandaged arm raised. Sonia spoke, her voice steady despite the pain. "This is for Jamal, for Keisha, for every kid this city has failed," she said. The march drew national attention, with activists from across the country joining the cause, but the cost kept rising. On June 3rd, Lorraine suffered a stroke, the stress of the past months too much for her heart. She survived, but her speech was slurred, her left side weak. Sonia cared for her, balancing hospital visits with legal meetings. "I'm sorry, Ma," she whispered one night, holding Lorraine's hand. Lorraine squeezed back, her eyes fierce. "Keep going," she mouthed. The breakthrough came in July. A former student, Malik, came forward with a recording of Ethan bragging about organizing the attacks, including Jamal's murder. The tape, grainy but damning, was enough to force the police to act. On July 20th, Ethan and 2 older accomplices were arrested, charged with assault, vandalism, and conspiracy. Ronald Caldwell's influence couldn't save him this time. Sonia's lawsuit settled in August 1993. The school board agreed to pay $500,000, reinstate Sonia, and implement anti-discrimination training. Heller resigned, her career in ruins. But the victory was bittersweet. Jamal was gone. Lorraine's health was fragile, and Sonia carried scars no settlement could heal. By September, Sonia returned to Englewood High, her classroom once again a sanctuary. Keisha, now a senior, helped her hang new posters, their hands steady. The school felt different. Not perfect, but hopeful. Sonia knew the fight wasn't over. Racism was a hydra. its heads endless. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Sonia's legacy lived in her students, in the community that marched, in the truth that refused to stay buried. The shadows of justice were long, but she'd learned to fight in the dark. Outro: Honor the fallen Sonia. Davis's story reminds us that justice comes at a price, but it's a price worth paying. If her journey inspired you, if it broke your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. We're here to honor the fallen, to lift up the fighters, to tell the stories that change the world. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep the fight alive. See you in the next one.